Okay.
We're live.
Whoa. All right, so we're gonna wait for some people to hop on, but I know that this is gonna be recorded.
Yes.
Oh, we have yay! Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so we have Dr. Andrea here. She's gonna talk about nervous system regulation for new parents, and we're very excited to have her. So I'm gonna give her an opportunity to tell us what she does, what she focuses on, and what we're gonna talk about today.
Awesome. Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so
and it's
excited
so
for
fun
you
to
to be
do this
here.
in person.
I know.
So I am Dr. Andrea Moore, and my background is as a physical therapist, and I have specialized in chronic pain, but that journey has brought me into the nervous system massively because so much of chronic pain has to do with the nervous system. And along the way, I struggled with massive amounts of anxiety and depression and just mental health stuff.
As we all do.
As we all do. And I felt like there was just so much more to the nervous system than I was learning through the chronic pain stuff. So I really branched out away from just that and started learning about the nervous system as a whole, and really took it to a level of, examining how past traumas, intergenerational trauma, collective just beliefs can all impact our nervous system and how we are feeling. And through this work, I really have massively changed my own life for the better. So many clients have benefited. Like, oh my goodness, I just have like the most amazing stories I can share too, of just shifts that people can make when they understand their own nervous system and then can apply the things that they learn about themselves in the process on a daily basis.
I'm so excited to talk about it because the parents that we see here are just all out of whack for whatever reason. Usually because their baby's all out of whack, and it's just this cycle. So it's like, is it the chicken or the egg? Were you out of whack or your baby was out of whack? Like, which one was it? So super excited to talk about all of that stuff with you. And if you're local to Lexington, she sees clients at Move Smart, right?
I do, yes.
So that's very exciting as a PT. So if you are looking for somebody to help you with that, then go see Dr. Andrea.
Yes. And if you're not local or you're looking to go for more of the nervous system, emotional side of things, then I have a virtual business as well. So
yes,
see me
I'm
virtually.
going to tag her in this so you can go follow her. But if you look at our post where we said to set a reminder, you can go back and I think she's tagged in that, so you can go follow her Instagram over there. All right, so let's dig in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is something that we talked about yesterday that I really found interesting was you're not going to be able to just really like fix yourself immediately, right? You're not going to be able to just like dig in and fix yourself and all of these just like deep things that you're going through. You just really have to focus on the surface level first. So can you like talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, and just to even give more context around that, it's this work to really regulate our nervous systems, and we can talk about what regulate our nervous systems even means, because I think there's a big misunderstanding around what nervous system regulation even is. It's a journey. It's not some destination. It's not something that happens overnight. It is a consistent like work in progress of getting to know our bodies, getting to understand them in the circumstances we're in the life phases we're in, which means some people can, I see this a lot in older clients that I see who are entering like kind of the last phase of their life after retirement, and all of a sudden they're like, whoo, everything just got thrown for a loop because they don't know what to do with themselves because they're retired. And now their kids are grown and they're taking on this whole new role, and they're having to like relearn all about themselves. So the skill isn't, oh, let me get to this place where I'm perfectly regulated and everything feels like exactly how it should be, because life's always going to throw us for another loop. Something's going to shift. We enter a new phase of life, and that could be really positive things that shift. We have a baby, we get married, we get our dream job, we move to our dream house. Like, we can have all these things that just shift because life is so dynamic. And so this skill is really about embracing oh, how do I keep learning about myself and growing and not be reaching this final destination of like, oh, I know exactly who I am and how I act in this world and how to regulate my system, because that's going to change.
It's a lot deeper than that, yeah.
Yeah. And so just having that like openness around it. And I think for new moms especially, you now have this entire other life that you are caring for. It's a lot. I also have a child. I'm speaking from experience here. And so I think if I was lucky enough to enter motherhood having done some work, definitely no one ever has done all the work. That's if they've said they've done all the work and they're perfectly healed, I would run the other way. But you know, I had an understanding of my nervous system. I was already really getting to know myself and how I operated when I entered in motherhood. And so I was lucky enough to do that. And for those who haven't, it's okay. Just meet yourself where you are. But it's kind of like being, maybe a dramatic example, but it's like, let's say you just get thrown in the deep end and you have no idea how to swim. It's like, you can't learn to swim in that moment. You just might need someone to come rescue you. You might just need to flail around until you just get to enough safety. The key is to not keep getting thrown into that. And just, this is what a lot of us do, is we just then are putting out fires, just trying to flail and get ourselves out, which we sometimes just have to do. Sometimes you just have to flail until you get out of a situation. But when you have in these pockets of time, you might be like, well, let me learn a little bit how to swim. Let me learn how to put my head underwater. And that's the only skill I'm going to master today. Okay. The only skill I'm going to master in the next month is, you know, how can I put my head underwater, not suck water up my nose? And then it might be learning the doggy paddle. I have no idea what the order of swimming is. I'm actually taking my kids to swimming lessons later today. But I'm not a swim coach, but hopefully y'all get my point here. Yep. Right. It's like, we have to give ourselves spaciousness to learn these things because they are skills and we can all learn them. And I think there's this, likely anyone who's coming here and watching, if you're like me, has perfectionism, has a little bit of like a type A, must know it all. And you're probably really freaking smart. Probably really smart, really analytical, really intelligent. So you're really used to knowing how to do things, and being not great at something is not something you're used to. So a lot of it is getting comfortable being like, oh, damn, I kind of suck at this. And that is okay. It's where we got to start. I sucked at knowing myself, sucked at knowing my body, and gave myself the spaciousness with a lot of kicking and screaming in the process to get to know myself.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that for sure. I never knew I was a perfectionist until my therapist told me that I was.
Same.
She was like, are you sure that you're not a perfectionist? So then when I became a mom, it was a big deal because I didn't really know what I was doing. And, you know, I get moms who come in and they say, I just don't know. Second time moms especially, I had this first baby, I didn't know what I was doing. So like I didn't breastfeed because I didn't know what I was doing. And I'm like, nobody does. Nobody knows what they're doing the first time around. So the point you brought up about nervous system regulation as a whole, like what is it? What's the definition? Tell everybody what that is.
Yeah, and I think I would imagine if y'all are here, you've probably heard this term. And I think a lot of people take it to mean, oh, our system should feel perfectly calm. Like, I'm regulated. A lot of people will use that phrase like, oh, I just need to get regulated, or I'm regulated, meaning this nice calm state, which is, to get geeky about it, the dorsal vagal state of the nervous system that we all like to be in, which is that state of we're calm, but we're also open, we're connected, we can be sociable, we can be funny. You know, it's not a completely calm parasympathetic state, which is your like rest and digest state. It actually has a little bit of sympathetic drive in it because there's like movement there. And that's the state that usually feels good. Like you're out and you're about, you're with your girlfriends, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like a human. Like that's the dorsal vagal state that we all like to be in. And that's a great state to be in. We should all strive to be in it more. And a big part of regulation is knowing how to ride up and down the nervous system ladder, which we can talk about, and be in the different states and also still have a sense of safety, have a sense of presence, even when there's big emotions up, even when you're full of anxiety or even when you're like overwhelmed and you're about to tear your hair out, that there's a part of you that's like, can see it for what it is. And when we can get in touch with that part, that's the part that can help bring you back. But we can actually be regulated through it all. Just all doesn't have to feel good. And I think that's the part that trips people up, is they just want to feel good all the time, which, again, nothing wrong with that. I like to feel good too.
Everybody wants to feel good all the time.
But what happens is when we feel bad, whether that's anxiety, whether that's depression, whether that's shame, whether that's feeling guilty or like we're not doing enough, we then add on layers of like, I'm not supposed to be this way, or I should be regulated. Something is wrong with me. And all that does is, one, it makes us feel way worse. And then it also upticks the nervous system sensitization. And the nervous system learns, ooh, feeling emotions is a threat. This is bad. And so then this cycle continues, because then the next time you are kicked into overwhelm, because who's not going to be overwhelmed as a mom? Again, that's heightened of like, oh, I'm overwhelmed again. Something's wrong with me. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. It's amplified, versus being able to be like, oh my God, like your baby has just, can I swear?
Yeah.
Okay. Just like, I was on a podcast yesterday and I swore, and she was like, I was like, oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
And then I swore again later on. I was like, sorry, I'm sorry, I can't help myself. Like your baby is just shit all over the place, like, and then barfed, and now your dog is barfing in the corner, and then like you have stuff in your hair, and then there's like food burning on the stove, to be in a state of like, oh my God, like this is insane. And like, of course I feel insane right now. Nothing's wrong. Like, why wouldn't I feel a little bit insane and overwhelmed right now?
I think I get that every day.
Yeah. And the second we can, this is where I'll tell my story about this morning, but the second we can be like, of course I'm overwhelmed. Of course this is insanity here. It instantly actually brings us down, because we're like, okay, now I've identified it. I've met myself where I am. And now I can start to be like, okay, what is like the next tiny baby step I need to do, versus being like, now I feel insane in this mess. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me that I feel overwhelmed? I failed as a parent. And then that just shuts you down. That puts you in like freeze state, in overwhelm. You get paralyzed. And then that's when you're in the corner in a fetal position crying. Not that I've ever been there before. We've all been there, but we know we can't take action from there, and that, it's fine. And even if you find yourself in that position, to be like, okay, here's where I am right now. It's just too much. It was too much. And to have that compassion for yourself.
I've definitely learned in those situations that laughing is what I have to do, because it kind of calms my nervous system down, because it is funny. Like, you look back at these things and you're like, a story from 3 years ago, you can be like, oh, that was really funny. But in the moment, you're like, my world is crashing down. Exactly.
And let's talk about this, and then I'll tell the story from this morning, because it's funny. And it's still ongoing.
Gosh.
What happens when we're in this state of overwhelm, when our fight or flight system is up in our nervous system, we get tunnel vision. So it's like we become very, very narrow. All we can see is this like tiny thing in front of us. And that was back from, caveman days, when it's like there's a lion chasing you. All you have to do is like just run straight, you know what I mean? Like focus on one thing, which is running away. And that served us really well then. It doesn't serve us when we're not actually being chased by a lion.
Exactly.
And so one of the big things, here's just a little like actionable thing you can do when you're in there, is to actually expand out your vision. And we can even do that through eye movements. So because we get so tunnel, when you're finding yourself just being like, world is crashing down, everything's going to crap, it's just start by like looking up. If you can get to a window, I'm like looking out a window right now. It's like, look as far as you can. Bonus if you can kind of go in front of the window or even go outside, and you can do this inside too. Obviously, it's just nicer to have. It works a little better when you're not in like a small room, but really moving your eyes in your head, looking diagonally, looking out, and by engaging in that visual system, you're bringing your nervous system back, because it's able to see. And you can even have this, I will literally go to my window and be like, oh, look, no one's coming to kill me. And like get that playfulness, and then it makes me laugh because it's like silly. But I'll literally be like, okay, good. There's no lions. There's no army that's trying to kill me. Like, and just bringing that back to your nervous system and be like, shit has hit the fan type, but like, we're okay. Mm-hmm. Like, we're okay. And so this morning, I have a cat who's an indoor-outdoor cat, and she likes to bring in live animals into her house. And so this morning, when my kid is having a bloody nose, it's like bleeding all over the place, and like really like distraught about it. And I'm trying to get him because I know I have to be here, and I'm like I had to bring him to camp. So I'm like trying to be like, at this point the nosebleed had ended, but he's just sitting there like so scared to take his hand away. And I'm like, just go get dressed. He's 7, and so then my cat comes in with a live chipmunk that she just lets loose in the house. And it immediately goes under our couch, which is like at this point, I'm like an expert at getting live animals under it. But the second they go under a couch, this thing is like 500 pounds and it's got like the like up and down things, you know, like a lazy boy. Yeah. And so like, I can't just like lift it up because if I bring it back down and she's under there, I'm scared I'm going to squish her. Like, and it's like my husband's gone at this point, and I'm just like, oh my God. Like, and I hadn't showered yet or anything. And I got to the gym this morning. So it was like, oh my God, like I just need to like get this and my mind was tunnel. I need to get this chipmunk out of my house. Okay. Like I can't have a chipmunk in my house. Like what? And then I was like, okay, hold up. Like let me use my own tools. And I did that. It was like, okay, hold on. Like let's look at big picture here. And I'm like, is it really that big of a deal that a chipmunk is in my house? Like we're about to leave. I don't want it in my house, but like,
is it an emergency?
It's not an emergency. What's it gonna do? I don't know. And so I opened, at this point I still hadn't taken a shower, so like I had time. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna open the back door, and I put flour by the back door so I could see if it ran out, because I was also like panicking of like, well, if I open this door, then I won't know if it runs out or not. And then what am I gonna do? And then I'm gonna be freaking out. I'm gonna be worried later that, do I know if a chipmunk's still in my house? Did it die somewhere, right? Is it rotting under my couch? Because chances are this thing is probably half dead because my cat has already gotten to it. But so then I had the idea, once I like expanded out and breathed, and I was like, oh, I can put flour so I can see the little footprints.
That's a good idea.
And so, thank you. So I took a shower, got my kid ready, did not see the chipmunk again. There was no footprints in the flour, so it definitely had not left. And after getting him all ready, I left the house and I'm driving him to camp, and I was like, I just left our back door wide open. I was like, cool. And I was like, yeah, no, it's really big, it's door big, and oh my gosh, what if someone breaks in, right? So it's like all these thoughts, and then it's like, again, I just like brought myself down of like, okay, worst case scenario, someone breaks into my house. I've already been robbed. I've lived through this. Like, I'm not going to die. We have really nothing valuable at this point. I live in a nice neighborhood. No one's probably, it's my back door. You cannot see it from anywhere. I don't think anyone's actually going to, but it's just this moment of like, while you're driving, like there's nothing I can do. The only thing I can do is just be like, how can I find safety and space to be like, well, okay, this is kind of a shitty situation, but I'm not going to die. No one's going to die. This is my refrain in my head all the time in case you can't tell.
We're safe.
We're safe.
But I think going to that point, though, you found internal validation of I am safe. But when you enter the world of social media and all of this information that's out there, you're always consistently seeking that external validation of, am I safe? Is my baby okay? Posting in Facebook groups. What can I do? I don't know what to do. And, everybody's like, call the doctor. You almost forget how to trust your own instincts and trust yourself. And in that moment, you knew, I've lived through this. Everyone will be okay.
Yeah.
So how do you get to that point? What can you use to trust yourself?
And so that took a long time to be able to get there, I would say. And it doesn't have to take a long time for everybody. And one of the ways, again, let's just like give people, if people are watching and they're able to even do this, is to just start by checking in and like, what is your connection with yourself? Because I think some people have a better connection with yourself and they just need permission to use it. And then I think there's others, and I was in this group. We don't have a good connection, that the connection is threatening in itself. When you try to connect with yourself, like your nervous system is like, oh my God, don't, it's dangerous in there. Mm-hmm. And so when that happens, it can take a little bit more working with to build up that connection. But again, it gets to be a skill, because this is something that is going to serve you for life. Like, it is worth taking time to develop that trust in yourself, because otherwise you will be constantly seeking external validation, and you'll be constantly getting responses and answers that aren't appropriate for you.
Because they just don't know you. They don't know your situation.
They don't. And, you know, it's like, it gets to the point where we have to stop that cycle of seeking the external validation, which doesn't mean we don't ask for support. It doesn't mean you have to do it alone. But there's a difference between knowing, kind of, it's like, I talk about running any support or advice or even like information you gather through your system. Mm-hmm. So it's like, let's say you come across a post that's like, the best thing you can do is take ice baths every day. Something like that, okay? Mm-hmm. I was like, hey, there's research that ice baths are really great. When I run that through my system, I'm like, that's fucking stupid. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do that. I'm like, I don't need to do that. I have a million other ways that I can work with my nervous system. Mm-hmm. No. Mm-hmm. Reject, done, right? Yeah. Versus, I use that one example specifically because probably 10 years ago, I was reading that and I was feeling literally so much guilt for not taking ice baths. Mm-hmm. I was like every day there'd be this moment of like, I should be taking an ice bath today. I'm like, I don't want to though. That sounds terrible. And then I'd feel guilty about it. Versus now I'm like, why the hell would I do that?
Maybe one day your body back then, your body was trying to tell you, like, you don't need to take an ice bath.
I don't like to do
that. That's not what we need to do right now. Yeah.
Whereas other people could come across that post and see it and be like, that kind of sounds like a cool challenge. Yeah. Maybe I will try that and let's see what happens. Other people might be like, that sounds terrible, but there's this like knowing of like, but something in me wants to try that.
Right.
Right. And it's like, you have to though be able to run it through your system to be like, what is it for me?
Right.
And so where I wanted to start people with is if you just put your hand on your heart, you can do this too, Ashley, if you want to.
Try not to hit my mic.
I know.
I did this morning actually when I was meditating.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Look at that. And you can close your eyes if you want to, if it doesn't feel safe to, or you are watching your baby or something. That's totally fine to keep it open, but just kind of letting your gaze soften. And just taking that moment to take a breath and not needing your breath to be in any way. If your breath feels short and anxious right now, let it be short and anxious. If it feels deep, let it be deep, and anywhere in between. And just say hello to your body. We so often forget we are in these bodies. And if you want, you can even open your eyes and just like look down at your body and just seeing it. And noticing how that is to even just be aware of the fact that you have a body. And noticing whatever comes up here, there's no right or wrong. And if it feels okay to go to the next step of just asking your body like, hey, what do you need right now? Or even what do you need today? And allowing it to respond. And your body's going to respond in one word or short phrases. If you're getting an entire paragraph and full sentences, that's probably in your head. And just be like, hello, head, I see you too. Just bring you back to the body. You can be like, thanks for your opinion. I'm asking my body right now. I can ask you later. And just notice what that's like.
My body's telling me something right now.
Ashley's body. Ashley's stomach's talking. I love it. Hello. But actually, it's funny because when you drop into that, you do increase digestion because you're bringing on parasympathetic state. So if you're like tummy's grumbling more, and
I'm telling you, every time I see a patient that happens, because I have to be the calm one.
Totally.
So I'm like, sorry.
No, it's a good sign though. It's like this. So I don't know. Do you mind sharing? What was that like for you? Or I know you're like also on camera here, so.
I think a lot of stuff came up, but also knowing that I brought 3 children into the world, and knowing that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
That came up, and just thinking about all of the people watching who have done the same.
Yeah.
And they were able, whether it was a belly birth or whether it was a vaginal birth or whatever way you brought a child into the world. And I think there's also a lot of guilt when it comes to the type of birth that we had.
Yes.
So like a lot of that comes up, but just being able to birth a child and feed a child is a lot.
It's amazing. Like it's completely amazing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, and this exercise, again, if saying hello to your body brings up a lot, you're not alone. Like, of course it does. There's so much programming. There's so much messaging against the female body. But when we start to just say hello to it and allowing that, it's like allowing that stuff to come up and to just notice that like, oh wow, there's all this that's kind of in the way of this connection. And seeing that as like, oh, thank you for showing me what's in the way. Versus I think what a lot of times happens is people try to connect to their bodies, whether it's through something like this or like any other practice, because there's a million ways you could go to connect to your body, and stuff comes up and it feels uncomfortable. And then we're like, see, I can't do it. Mm-hmm. Versus something coming up. And let's say there's a massive amount of guilt that comes up and being like, guilt is showing, because there's some work to do around guilt. And that's where, too much to get into for today, but like that's where a lot of the work I do is like, okay, then well, how do you work with this guilt so it's not interfering with your connection with your body? And then it's like, there could be a lot of layers to that, but it's like when you have that willingness to just be like, okay, what's here? Learn to work with it, or to learn to give it space, or sometimes just one little trick you can do is just sometimes you can just ask it to temporarily step back. Be like, oh, hello, guilt, I see you. I'm not going to talk to you right now. Just, I need you to step back. I'm trying to talk to my body. Just be like, can you back up? And you can be like, nice. Like, imagine you're talking to one of you. If you have multiple kids, you're talking to one kid and one kid's, up in your face. And you're like, okay, just hold on. I'm talking to him over here. Like, back up. We'll get to you later. I can only talk to one at a time. And right now I'm trying to talk to my body. So just move over. Mm-hmm. And it'll eventually come back. But it's like a nice little, like, you don't have to like sit here and address everything. It doesn't have to be this like exhaustive process where it's like, every time I'm trying to talk to my body, I have to like work through all this stuff. It's like, no, sometimes you just be like, everyone else step back. Okay. Mm-hmm. Enough. Mm-hmm. And you could like, again, be playful with it and direct, set a boundary with your own emotions. Yeah. And that actually is surprisingly effective, at least momentarily.
I think we forget that we can do that.
We forget
that we can just focus on one emotion, or we forget that we can push our emotions to the side. And not that we don't want to feel them, but like those guilt and shame and all of the things that we're feeling inside of our bodies that we're just creating. Yeah. Like that's just something that we just made up. Like,
totally.
I feel guilty that I don't know. A good example. I feel guilty that like I fed my toddler a Rice Krispie for breakfast. Like, why?
Yeah.
She ate.
Exactly.
She ate and she was happy and she didn't cry.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like, we'll do better tomorrow.
And I think that what you just said, that like, let's say there's something where it feels really important though, because let's say like now that it's the Rice Krispies tapping into like, well, I do want her to have better nutrition and maybe, whatever. It's like, okay, dwelling on what happened in the past isn't helpful. It's like, I don't need to sit here and feed the guilt. That's not going to help you. That's not going to give you the energy to then do better tomorrow if you want to make a different choice. Mm-hmm. But also be like, yeah, today is just one of those days where everyone's getting cereal at every meal. And that's what I got today. And everyone got fed. Done. And I can also choose, if that feels aligned where I am in life and what you have available, to be like, okay, maybe tomorrow we're going to do a little extra on the side of the cereal. We'll have a banana. You know what I mean? Like, enter in like this one, what's this next baby step you can do instead of being like, tomorrow everyone's getting 3 home-cooked meals that are completely new. No. Absolutely not. Too big of a goal.
Our best.
Baby step.
Yeah, baby steps for sure.
We've been baby stepping lunch for, I don't know, like 3 years now. I'm trying to wait for the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but we haven't moved past it yet. And just being like, you know what, this is what I got right now. I'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, and I think there's just so much pressure just from everybody to be perfect, and to every single step of your day along the way, every single thing in your life needs to be perfect. And when you have a kid, you don't want to screw them up, so you don't want to do anything wrong. So we talked a lot yesterday about, like our parents and how they didn't really, I mean, they probably had that mindset a little bit, but there's just so much pressure around, like, don't screw your kid up. So do you want to talk about like that and the guilt of that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what just came up as you were talking about that, I don't think we mentioned this yesterday, but the verb parenting didn't exist until like, I think the 1980s.
Oh.
I want to say 1980s. Something like that. Like, I might be a little off on the date. But it's like, that is a new concept. Like, you didn't parent. You were a parent.
It wasn't a verb.
No. And so it's so interesting if we go into like, there's like this whole like movement right against like the patriarchy and all of that stuff, which like, hell yes. But what's happened is like, it's been co-opted by, I think, a lot of well-intentioned people to just create almost more pressure on women in a completely different way, and through like a lens of impact. Like, some of it is, there's some really good stuff out there, and some of it's like this really sneaky, like holding women down in just now a completely different way through this perfectionism, through these expectations. And I don't think some people are doing it I don't think it's like usually malicious or anything like that, but we've just taken on this completely different role where we're just, this is my theory, we're so used to not knowing how to trust ourselves that we have now, okay, so sure, maybe we aren't outsourcing our power to, your white male or whatever you want to say, but we're just outsourcing it to somebody else who's now claiming that they have our best interest at heart, but like, they don't, because they don't know you. And as long as you're outsourcing your power, you're going to be stuck. But so what we were talking about is, so it's like parents never parented. They didn't have like these expectations of themselves. So that's like that. I'm sure they had guilt. I'm sure there was things there, but it's like for a whole, it really didn't exist because there was no like bar to meet. And now we have this like massive amount of here's what you should do and how you should act and blah, 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 blah. And all these people that, again, they might have really good intentions because they're sharing what worked really well for them, but it's not going to work for everybody. It might not work for you. And I only have one child, by the way, so I'll like be open about that. So it's like, but what I have advice to say might not work for somebody who has 3 kids, because I don't know what it's like to juggle 3 kids. And I think you see a lot of parenting experts, by the way, that do have 1 kid. My sister likes to point this out because she has 3 kids. She's like, I refuse to listen to anybody on parenting unless they have more than 1, unless they have 3 kids or more.
It is a different ballgame, I do.
Yeah.
But I'm also an only child. So like, I know what it was like to be parented as an only child and then to have 3 kids.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's different.
So it's like we all bring our unique perspective.
Yeah.
And I think often what happens is we take what was done to us and we don't want to do the same to our kids. And so we often overcompensate. We're like, I'm so determined not to screw my kid up, which is a beautiful sentiment. But here's the thing. Your kids are going to be screwed up in some way. It's impossible for them to come out of this not screwed up or not having some things to deal with. And I'm going to argue that is a positive thing for them, because when kids have no tension in their life, they have nothing to push back against, they get everything they want, everything is perfectly regulated and happy, and all their emotions are met at every minute of every day. Guess what? When they turn 18 and they go out in the real world, they will they will be crushed. They will have no resilience, no ability to deal with adversity. And like, you're seeing this already play out in Gen Z that are going to college right now. There's the dropout rate is higher than it's ever been. The anxiety, I saw a study that was like, the amount of college students reporting anxiety is like 92%. Like, it's insane. The kids aren't like, they don't go to parties. They're not dating. Kids don't want to drive. Like, they turn 15, no one wants to get their driver's license anymore because they're so anxious and scared because they have no ability to deal. They don't know how to feel the discomfort in their body because everything has kind of just been handed to them by really well-intentioned parents that wanted to make their kids' life easier.
I mean, even my dad is an example. My entire life, he would say, I want to give you more than I have. I want to do more for you than I ever had. And that was always well-intentioned, but then you forget the emotion piece of it.
Yeah.
It's like, I want to give you the world, but also, like, I can't emotionally, like, do that.
Yeah. Totally, because they didn't know. Like, your dad didn't have. I mean, like, these are like newer skills, you know. Yeah. And so, and we like live in a world where we can so easily bypass emotions through scrolling, through like just binging TV, through like playing games, whatever. That we forget how much living in the real world or doing things that are worth doing, like being the parent you want to be, having the career you want, building a business, just being creative, require us to feel anxious and uncomfortable. Like we were talking about this on the phone yesterday, right? Of like, in order to like growing up, it's like if you wanted to hang out with your friend, you had to do the thing of like, damn it, I have to call their house and like, oh my God, their mom's going to answer and then she's going to ask me embarrassing questions. And it was so anxiety, right? Like, I hated doing it, but there wasn't another choice. And now kids can just text, right? And so the example I was telling Ashley is my brother, who is younger than me, and he was talking about like, whatever, I have to get the special test and it's going to cost me like $3,000. But if I could do it at this other clinic, it would be like $600. And I was like, well, why do you not do it at the other clinic? And he's like, well, because of this whole prescription thing, well, whatever. It came down to, when we really broke it down, he was too anxious to make a phone call. It would require him to make a phone call that would be really uncomfortable. And I'm like, so you're just going to throw away $2,400 because that? He's like, yeah, probably. And I'm like, okay.
But it's funny because I laughed because I can resonate with that so much.
Yeah.
Like, I hate calling people.
Me too. I totally do too. I would for $2,400 though.
I would probably, I would swallow that.
But if it was like $10, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like, that's not worth it.
No, I would throw away $10 for sure.
Yeah. But it's like, we live in this world where we can just kind of like bypass and just move around the anxiety, and we've almost made anxiety be a bad thing, where it's like, it's actually really normal in a lot of cases. And that's what Ashley was talking about, is like this external validation and the scrolling and constantly getting information is just a way to try to bypass having to like feel internally what's right for me. That feels crappy because we end up butting up against our own stuff. The guilt comes up and then we have to feel our own guilt and deal with that and be like, and all this stuff. But when we develop that connection, life gets so much easier. So much easier, because now you just cut through all the noise and someone tells you something and you're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So thanks for your opinion.
Do you think, this is just something that we didn't really talk about yesterday, but do you think that the disassociation from your own nervous system and your lack of emotional regulation contributes to a dissociation from your own baby sometimes?
Oh, yeah.
How do you think people can come back from that? I know that's a tough ask, but I mean, I'm sure it requires a lot of work and maybe potentially even therapy. But I do see a lot of moms who just kind of are not, they don't want to be. They're thankful to have a baby. But, you know, you see this a lot in postpartum depression. I'm just disassociated from my baby.
Yeah. I would say the most important piece is, it's like, it can be a both and. Like, there's got to be a coming back to yourself. And sometimes with dissociation, I mean, it's a big topic. And so it's like, proceed with as your level of comfort here. But sometimes just asking like, how far out of my body am I,
Mm-hmm.
is a really awesome, like, don't beat yourself up for being dissociated, because it's like what immediately people be like, oh my god, I'm just dissociated, that's bad, and then you just dissociate more.
Skyrocket, yeah.
Versus being like, whoa, I feel like I'm, and when you're dissociated, I promise this question makes sense. If you're not, this question will be like, that's a weird question. But when you're feeling dissociated, if you ask yourself, how far out of my body do I feel, like 9 times out of 10 people immediately know the answer, and you might be like, I feel like I'm floating, in the clouds above my body, or maybe I'm just like just a little bit above my head. And it's first just being like, okay, that's where I am, and not trying to force yourself back into your body, but literally just being like, okay. And what I actually encourage people to do is to be like, go a little further out, dissociate a little more, and you'll like almost feel this like, oh, okay, that actually feels good to do. Like, I'm not trying to force it. And then as you just breathe with that, often, naturally, people will be like, oh, well, I'm kind of back in my body all of a sudden. But again, that's not the outcome. We're not attached to the outcome. But it's this just allowing yourself to be where you are often is exactly then what brings you right back to your body, because you've presenced yourself, even if yourself is up in the clouds. Does that make sense? Is that like really okay?
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah.
Okay. And so, and it's a practice of doing that over and over and over again when you have the space. And I think when you have a baby, it is both one of the hardest times, but also sometimes can be, in a weird way, at least, because I did this a lot, an easier time, because when you're breastfeeding, when you have to carry your baby, it's like, that's all you can do is be present. Your arms are full, like you just have to sit there. And so it's like, well, now I can just come back to myself and even like use your baby and to like help. You guys can like help regulate each other. Not that you should really ever use your baby to regulate you, because that's a lot to put on them. But like, you can use their presence to help, just like looking into their eyes, and just see how that feels, if that helps or if that makes you dissociate more, right? If that feels like it's too intense, then...
Well, and I think there's a lot of parents who don't even do that. They just scroll on their phone with their other hand.
Yeah.
And they breastfeed, and I remember doing that with my first. I just remember it's not that I wasn't connected to him, it was just I was more connected to, getting away from my anxiety.
Totally.
Because breastfeeding was hard.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, here's a way for me to distract myself from that emotion. And I think just taking, even one feeding a day where you can just connect and just like look into your baby's eyes and, just bring yourself back to where you are.
Yes. And I love the like starting with one feeding a day.
Baby
like
steps.
Phone goes somewhere else. And it's just being here, and you might be like, and I'm going to be here with all my anxiety right now, and just like breathing with that, and then having that again, that like you can like look around and having that awareness. I'm like, even with all this anxiety here, like I'm safe. There's no saber-toothed tigers. Again, kind of like we went back to the chipmunk story, right? It's like this like expanding out and like, and I'm okay, like. Finding this level of safety that gives space to all emotions to be present, not this perfection or this ideal scenario we've dreamt up in our heads that we maybe will achieve for half a second, maybe one time in our life.
Well, and I just remember, and I won't say who it was, but somebody, when I was, I was in the toddler phase, I was pregnant, and I was on my computer, and he was like pulling on my leg, he was like, can you play with me? And I was trying to finish something up on my computer, and they said, you don't need to be on your computer when you should be parenting. And that like struck me to my core. And if you've ever had anything, like if you've ever had anybody say anything like that to you, or anything related to, guilt or whatever, that just sticks with you through all of parenting. So I've had to do so much work around that. And I just feel like, even in the hospital, like you should be feeding right now because it's been 2 hours, or you should be doing this, or you should is such a bad word in my opinion.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
All the shoulds, they just build up, and you just feel that so much, and then you just can't let go of it.
Totally. And I can like see that brings up a lot for you still. Yeah.
And still, like even he's 9 now, and I'm like, I should not be I should not be working right now. Like, even though he knows, like, mom has to work right now.
Yeah.
I should turn off my computer and pay attention to it.
Yeah. Well, this is a great example of the whole, like, parenting didn't exist. Like, and, like, yes, we have obviously, like, this bleeding of work that, like, that didn't exist before. Well, actually, it always used to exist when you go back to, like, agriculture, right? Like, people had a farm or, like, lived on a farm. And so, like, work and life were in one.
Yeah.
And then we went to, like, industrial, which is, like, then there's this huge separation. But anyways, whatever. That's like a whole...
It's a whole
I could get so sidetracked. Andrea, bring yourself back. Sorry. Okay, back to this. But, like, there's this expectation, and I think a lot of, like, we'll just talk about gentle parenting, right? It's like attachment parenting or whatever all these styles are, it's like they make it seem like if you are not paying attention to your kid 100% of the time that you have somehow failed. And it's just like, that actually is going to raise a kid that has severe narcissism or something, right? Like that raises a kid that has no resilience and no ability to be independent. Like, it's actually not a good thing to be paying, like, attention to your kid 100% of the time.
I think a lot of people have that skewed.
Oh my gosh.
And I think
so
I was really big into it.
Yeah.
And
I was too.
I do gentle parent, I do attachment parent and all the things, but I went too far. I went too deep. So, like, first baby, it was like, I can't put him down if he cries. I have to hold him the whole time he cries. And then I couldn't handle that emotion. Yeah. That was too much for me. So I'm so big on teaching parents, like, you need to put your baby down in a safe space and you need to walk away. Like, you need to detach from that for a second, bring yourself back, calm down, take a breath, and then go get your baby, because your baby's safe. Your baby's fed, your baby has a clean diaper, your baby's okay. You don't have to hold them while they scream their brains out, you know, because you need to calm down first.
Yes, totally. And this is where we have to run stuff through our own system, because there are parents who, and what I'm about to say is there's no judgment or shame or any of this. There are parents who have to work all day, and then they come home and they're tired, they're burned out, they got crappy maternity, right? It's like for a million reasons that are not their fault. They have no space left. And then when they are sitting down to do more emails, and when their kid's pulling on them, there really is a place for putting work aside and having that connection time. That parent knows that. They know that deep down. It's painful to hear, but when they hear that, no one should be ever saying anyone should be doing something, right? But it's like when you have that, like, you see that post about connection time, it's like that cuts you to the core because you know it's true for you. Versus, I actually had a lot, like, I only worked part-time, like, and my husband also was very, very, like, interactive. My kid gets so much attention. He is the only child, okay? And I swear, when one person tells me, you need more connection time, I'm like, go fuck yourself. I was like, my kid gets way too much. Like, he does not, that is not, and that's what I thought, though. And so I kept more and more. Let me connect more. Guess what? His behavior only got worse because he actually needed us to set boundaries with him and learn that he's not the center of the universe. And this is when he was older. This is like when you have a newborn, they kind of are the center of the universe. That's fine, right? This is past the age of 3-4, where, like, your kid actually has to learn that they're not the center of the universe. And, like, mom has to get stuff done. Mom needs to cook. Mom needs to finish work. Mom needs to take a bath, whatever you need to do. And they can go entertain themselves. And guess what? When a kid learns how to entertain themselves, it's the best thing ever. We, like, cultivated the crap out of that. And my kid just, like, it's so weird now. He just, like, will come home from school and, like, play. And I'm like,
what's wrong?
Do with myself? I was like, this was a lot of work, but it all paid off because we had to, like, come back. Yeah, because we went way too far in the, like, gentle parenting realm as well. And it's what works, because it's going to work really well for some kids. It did not work for my kid. It did not work. And again, not that we don't use certain elements. Like, I'm a very, like, kind and compassionate parent. He needs really strict boundaries. Like, he needs to be told no.
Well, that's the thing with, you know, like, some parents feel like they can't set boundaries. They're afraid to say no. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, because they're afraid of what emotion they're going to feel as a result of their child's emotion.
Exactly.
So same thing with newborns. You feel like, I cannot sit with this emotion. This is too much. And those people who don't have the partner or the support person or whoever to just pass the baby off to, they don't have anywhere else to go. they have to learn how to sit with it. And sometimes it's too much, and that's, where you get the depression and the anxiety, and it's a lot.
Yeah. No, it is. Yeah, we were not meant to do this alone.
No.
Absolutely not.
No, but we are. We have to. So, we need to turn a corner somewhere. And not all of us can afford, postpartum doulas or support or, anything like that.
And yeah, it's like when you have what Ashley is pointing out about that emotion that's coming up. And a lot of times this is unconscious. We don't realize it. So when you take the pause to be like, oh, I don't want to take this toy away from my kid. Maybe it's I don't want to take the iPad away because I know he's going to scream. What if you're so he's going to scream and I can handle that? This iPad needs to go away right now. We have gone past whatever established screen, whatever your things on, we're not going to talk about that, right? Whatever your things on screen time is. Let's say it reached that point where you're this was the stopping time. And you're and I can stand in my own power and knowing of this is the boundary I set. I'm going to hold it. And he might scream his head off for the next 30 minutes about it. But that's the boundary that needed to be set. And being when you're really confident about that, and the example I'll bring people back to is if your kid was running towards a busy street, you wouldn't, and you're no, don't do it. And the kid was no, I want to run. You wouldn't be okay. Right?
Okay, bye.
It's in that moment that there's no choice but to hold that boundary.
Right. And
so when you can get, and it's because you're confident about that boundary.
Right.
There's so many other boundaries screen time, or do I let him have this toy, or should I make him eat his vegetables or not? Where we're really wishy-washy about it because there's no right answer. There's no protocol. There's no it's going to be different for every kid. Does your kid have sensory issues and, him just touching that pea to his lip was the biggest win of the year? Or is your kid just whatever, only wanting to totally fine with eating peas and just being a butthead and just wants ice cream, which is my kid. Weird. And then if I'm just eat your peas if you want ice cream, and then he eats them all totally fine, right? It's you have to know what's true for my kid. There's no right answer. When we can get that confidence about this is the boundary or this is the thing that I want to follow through with, and hold it to the same level of confidence as I'm going to stop my kid from running out of the street, all of a sudden you can deal with a whole lot more emotions because you're
you do it once, then you sit with it and you realize, oh, that wasn't that bad. Yeah. Because they come down.
Totally.
I mean, some kids with sensory issues don't really come down that easy, but most often they do come down at some point.
They will move through it. And so much nervous system safety is about this, trust that we will move through this. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be graceful. It does not have to be in the best way possible. We can always do it better another time, but we're going to move through this. This too shall pass. And the first few times, I remember because I was a very permissive parenting because I had so many issues setting boundaries. And so gentle parenting sounded so great because I was oh, I never have to set a boundary, right. Which actually is not what true gentle parenting is, but it's what it's gotten skewed to be. So that's how a lot of parents take it because when we suck at setting boundaries myself. So when I had to first learn to set a boundary, oh my God, it felt like my insides were being ripped apart. It felt so horrible. I literally needed my husband there to be don't give in. Don't do it. I'm okay. Yep. And I could be with this. And now it's there's still certain things that I don't feel great about, but it's okay. It's I learned the skill and I sat with that really big discomfort and it just dissipates over time because your body's oh, okay, actually this isn't that huge of a deal. Nobody dies.
Yeah. And I think with the first year, it's so easy for me to look back as a mom of a 9, a 7, and a 3-year-old to be oh, that was just a blip. Yeah. That was nothing. But when you're in it, it feels like it's never going to end. And it's just all those feelings are just all jumbled up and just feel like they're going to last forever.
Oh my gosh. Hugely. Absolutely.
And eventually they will pass.
They will.
It's not going to last forever.
It won't at all. And that's when you can look back at it and laugh.
Exactly.
You're wow, okay, I was really stressing about
lots of funny stories.
Bottle to use or whatever.
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
Was not.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good point too. Looking almost outside of yourself and thinking, will I care about what bottle or pacifier I use in 2 years? Probably not. will orally maybe, but like if we talk about like oral function, maybe.
Yeah.
But like, will I care about like whether I gave a bottle of formula a year from now? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
So
you bring up the oral function thing. So I'm gonna break because my kid used a binky. Okay, that was like he would not use like a lovey, a stuffed animal, like nothing. He held it one and then had the other one in his mouth. And my mom's a dentist, and she was like, "Dude, like you have got to get rid of that." And I'm like, and like we actually like he was only allowed to have it in his crib. But at around 3, my mom was like, "You really have to get rid of it." But right around 3, we were planning literally a move across the country, and I was like, "I'm not gonna take away this one thing." Again, this goes to like this knowing or this like trusting of like all these things are like, "Oh my God, this is horrible," and he had a huge open bite. Like I'm getting my mom in my ear, and I'm like, no. Like, I'm not taking this. Like, this is a massive move. There's nothing else to give him. He just, like, would never, like, even as a baby, would not take to anything else.
Yeah.
And so it just seems wrong. It just seems really unnecessarily mean. Worst case scenario, I get braces, I do myofunctional therapy. Do you know what I mean? It's almost this, like, we can fix, like, you can fix that, sort of, right?
Yeah.
And so and then we just let it probably go. So it was, like, around 4, I was like, all right, we maybe need to do something about this. Like his bite was real open again, getting my mom. And we started like reading some books about it. And literally I was like, kept having this like, okay, what do I do? And I was giving myself the space to like figure out the best way about it. And literally one day he just goes, Mom, I don't want this anymore. And just gave it to me. Never talked about it again.
Oh my God.
I was like,
wow.
Amazing what happens when and I'm not saying that's going to happen to everyone.
Right.
And this was probably, he was like probably like,
but so many parents struggle with that.
But I'm like, thank God.
And guess what? So ashamed
his bite closed, and we just went to the dentist you recommended at Midway or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, he has a beautiful palate. His airway looks great. He has all this space. And I was like, literally no issue. I did nothing. Like, I did absolutely nothing.
Wow. It's incredible.
I know.
But we just
regulate my system around it, actually. Hold on. I say I did nothing. I did a shit ton of nervous system regulation around, like, I don't know what to do here yet, and I'm waiting for the answer to come in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I kept getting every time I kind of checked internally. It was almost this, like, just wait. There's no urgency. And so I had to fight the urgency, and I was like, I don't know how. I don't know, whatever, you want to get real woo-woo, but my nervous system clearly just knew it would be fine. Not that I really think our nervous systems can predict the future, but anyways, it's still new.
Well, I have my own story about like that whole thing. So my husband deployed when my son was 17 months.
Gosh.
And I was pregnant. I didn't know it at the time, but I was pregnant. And my son was getting up in the middle of the night. And I had so much messaging around the baby needs to sleep through the night. The baby needs to be in his own space. The baby needs to be detached from you. You need to start weaning, because we were still breastfeeding. So I left him to cry in his crib. His dad just left for a deployment. Yeah. Like, he'd been gone a week. And I was like, he's just going to cry. But also, there's a knowing around that of like, I can't handle a lot because I don't have a partner right now. Like, he's a million miles away. So, but I also just listened to them, to everybody else, to social media, to all the mom groups, to everybody who said, don't trust yourself, don't trust your gut. When we could have just co-slept and it would have been so much easier. We could have just breastfed through the night. It would have been so much easier on me. And my nervous system knew that him crying was bad. So, like, of course, within a week he was back in my bed. But
yeah, that's a great example, though.
Like, it was just so much programming around, like, he needs to sleep through the night. And so many parents just hear that and they think, my baby should be sleeping through the night by 6 weeks because my sister's was.
Yeah.
Or my baby should not, mom's on call, taking care of babies, like all the sleep training programs. Like, my baby should be sleeping 6 hours by 6 weeks or 12 hours by 12 weeks. Like, when actually that messes with your milk supply, and then people's milk supply tanks. And then they're like, what happened? What's wrong? Because it's all these external things. You're not listening to yourself. You're not listening to your gut when your body's telling you need to nurse at night for the milk supply. It's just all, it's all related.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you just like nailed it on this like external stuff telling us and overriding.
You're just overriding that input, that intuition. Like I say, trust your mom gut for a reason. It's there for a reason. You have to listen to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're, your baby's crying and you want to pick them up, then pick them up.
I know.
Pick them up.
Yeah, seriously. Yes.
And if you want to sit your baby down in a safe space to let him cry. Like just listen to what your body's telling you. And
exactly.
What you feel is right.
Yeah. And I'm going to add a caveat that might be annoying, but because I always listen to what you know is right. I think what happens, and this is what happened for myself and a lot of people, is when we don't have, this goes back to this connection piece, when we don't have that connection or we don't know what it's like, we end up accidentally listening to fear or listening to other voices we've heard thinking it's our body.
Yes, that is true.
And so that is the really tricky part to differentiate, but it also doesn't have to be that tricky. So I'll give like a way to start telling is if you think back to an experience that you've had, and it might honestly be best to just take it out of motherhood right now. Think back to like something you've done in your life where you're like, I knew what to do. Like maybe you went against advice. Maybe you went against other people and you just like had that knowing. And it like, you're like, I was so confident in my decision. I trusted myself. And just tap into like that, like just think back on that experience and take a moment to just like bring it up in your body, bring up what it felt like. And you'll get like this imprint in your body of what that feels like to be trusting that knowing. And so maybe, and that might feel different for everyone. For me, it's like this like openness, but this is really like solidness. Like I just feel solid. Like I don't have a better way to describe it, but I feel it. Versus when I'm listening to someone else and when I think I need to do something, it's this, and so now think back to an experience where you've listened, like you can think back exactly on that, listening to all these moms and taking this advice that like was not right for your body. And it's like, what does that feel like? Mm-hmm. And for me, and again, this can feel different for everybody, that energy is like very up here and it's very like panty and very like anxious and really fast. And so when I'm making a decision, and I'm like, okay, am I listening to my knowing or someone else? Or it's like, I can just tap into like, how does that feel in my body? And if I'm feeling like, even if it feels like I have to do this thing and there's all these shoulds and it's like, yes, this is what I need to do. I'm like, nope, this energy isn't right. That's not the energy I want to take action out of. And so it's like, how do I tap back into that knowing? And sometimes that knowing, I'll have that and I'm terrified at the same time. Like it's a really scary choice to make. Or it's I don't know how this is going to work out, but it's like, but that trust is there. It's like, but I feel that openness and I've learned that I can trust that over time. Mm-hmm. So that's just a way to just start tapping in and start noticing like, oh, did I make this decision out of this or this? And then just being like, oh, okay, now I have some data. It's just data. There's no right or wrong. I still will make impulse decisions out of this, And it's like, oh, okay, well.
An impulsive person by nature, but I have noticed in the past, doing a lot of work on myself is like fear, the emotion of fear is not my knowing.
Yes.
Like if it feels like I'm just at peace with it, then that's it. That's the decision. But if it's coming from a place of fear, like, oh, like you shouldn't get on the plane. What if it crashes?
Yeah.
Like that's just my ego or like that's my fear talking.
Totally.
But if it's like, well, it could go either way, that's how I know. Like that was the right decision.
I love that. Yeah.
But it is different for everybody.
It is. Yeah, it really is going to be different for everyone. So that's where it's like, just notice, like, what does it feel like for you? And if you're like, I have no idea, I cannot even think of a single time I've made a decision, start small. It might be like, when did you order a meal you really liked at a restaurant? Right? And you're just like, yeah, that's the dish I want. Or like you chose your outfit and you're like, damn, this looks good today or whatever, right? It can be little things. And you can even start to practice with those things of like, okay, I'm just going to look at the menu of the restaurant and be like, which is the thing that I'm drawn to and what does that feel like? And here's the thing is that we also do need some detachment from the outcome because who knows, a chef could go fuck up that dish and then it tastes terrible. And that didn't mean that your body was wrong, right? It was just like, well, the chef screwed that up and now I can send it back and be like, great. Right? It's like, The knowing has to be separated out from like then to a degree. This is like, I feel like there's a lot of nuance here from the outcome though. Right? Like you could have had a knowing of like, oh, here's the perfect job, and maybe it was great for a year and then it sucked. Like that didn't mean your knowing was wrong. It's just
feel like there's no wrong decisions. Like especially when it comes to parenting.
Yeah, there's not.
You do it one way, I do it a different way. Like we don't have to do everything exactly the same, because if we did, then everybody would be the same and the world would be really boring.
Exactly.
So we should probably wrap it up and see if we should look and see if we have any questions. Do you have it pulled up on your phone? I don't know if you can see, because I saw a few comments on here, but I don't know if I can see.
Yeah, I think if you scroll up.
Yeah, I'm going to see.
No, I'll let you do that then. Okay, you guys can see.
Quick tips for co-regulation with your baby when breastfeeding is challenging.
I think that would be what you said about just, you know, in that moment of breastfeeding, just having that like we are safe. Yeah. And breathing skin to skin is so good for co-regulation.
Yes, and we have a post that's from like it's pinned on Ashley IBCLC, and it's like breastfeeding affirmations, like to tell yourself when it gets hard. So just like write that in your, like put it in your notes in your phone and like pull it up and say like,
oh, I love that. Yeah.
This is like, this will pass, or like, this is hard right now and I'm not alone, you know, things like that are really important. So if anybody has any questions, please drop them in the comments. But do you have any last words that you want to say?
That you can learn to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And that you can move through this, and like it wasn't meant to be easy. And like it's okay that it's not easy. It's okay that it feels messy and that like you feel like you have no idea what you're doing, because like no one does. And like it's almost like a puzzle scattered on the floor and you're like, how do I figure this out? It's like that is the journey, is figuring it out. You're not supposed to know, and that's okay, and you get to learn.
Well, it's just like we were talking about yesterday, you know, the 9-year-old was parented a lot different than the 3-year-old is. There's a lot of difference in the way I was 9 years ago as a first-time mom versus now a third-time mom, which is why you see all those posts of like, you know, third-time mom versus first-time mom. You know, there's just a lot of learning, and there's a lot of like, that is the fun of it though. Like that's the journey. Like it wasn't supposed to be perfect. He is turning out the way he was supposed to.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I parented him. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like have fun with it when you can.
Yeah. So I would imagine that a lot more people are going to watch the replay. So if anybody has questions while you're watching the replay, we'll just come back through the comments and answer those. But you want to tell people how you can, how they can find you?
You can find me at Dr. Andrea Moore on Instagram. I have a podcast that's the Unweaving Chronic Pain podcast. And while my stuff talks a lot about chronic pain, I work with a lot of anxiety as well. And if you just replace the word chronic pain for anxiety, I actually might be completely shifting that and just making that. That's not an official announcement, but so just know that like there's a lot of overlap there. But you can find me there, and if you want to learn more about gaining that trust with yourself, how to work through those layers that might be in the way, then feel free. I have free consultations and the link in bio type thing that you can sign up for.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This was so fun.
It was super fun. We'll have to do it again. All right. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you next time.